Hi, and welcome to the Magnificent Misfits podcast, where we intimately explore the lives of successful misfits, delving beyond their achievements to reveal the human stories behind their triumphs. A misfit is anyone who has taken on a journey different from their peers who come from a similar background and who have dared to walk on an undiscovered path. Their stories and journey will hopefully inspire other misfits to carve their own paths. Join me, Sid, as I meet and interact with these amazing people to discuss their life stories. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Magnificent Misfits podcast. Hope you're all doing well. And as always, my effort is to bring you some amazing guests who have some great experiences and stories to share. And hopefully, you take away something from each of these conversations. And trust me, I have a very interesting guest with me today. And let me dive straight in and let me introduce her to you, and we'll get the conversation going. My guest today is Anuja Lath, or Andy, as she's known. Andy is the owner and resident potter at Aura Pottery near Chandigarh. Aura Pottery is a contemporary ceramic studio for professionals and beginners to experience pottery through retreats and workshops. Aura Life, an extension of Aura Pottery, is a creative getaway for artists to experience and live in the lovely farm that Aura Pottery is housed in, a space that Andy has crafted herself over the years. Aura Life also has a boutique online store that has some really interesting and unique creative ceramic pieces that are available for sale. Interestingly, Andy's early life and career is a contrastingly different one from her current one. Andy, along with her late husband Atul Gupta, founded India's first IT web services company, Pugmarks Interweb Private Limited, and some of the earliest websites they created were for India's leading newspapers. In a turn of events a few years down the road, Andy and Atul had to exit Pugmarks, but their journey continued with RedAlkemi Online Private Limited, which is a 360-degree IT services company working for a global clientele. RedAlkemi is still going strong today after more than 2 decades, but mostly in the space of digital design. Another interesting turn of events happened when Andy discovered her love for pottery much later in life, I must say, and turned that into her passion project with Aura. I met Andy recently at the Beach House project at Bali, and I believe that her journey, the ups and downs, the stories, the learnings, the fun, and her attitude to life is something we can all learn so much from. The theme for our conversation today is making bold moves in life and overcoming challenges. And I really can't think of anyone better than Andy to speak to this. Andy, welcome to the Magnificent Misfits podcast, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Sid. It is such a pleasure to meet you and really, really nice to be a part of your show.
Likewise, Andy. And, we'll kick it off. I mean, I know a lot about you, but our listeners don't. So I'll start off with, we'll talk a lot about what you've done over the years, but maybe if you could give a brief sense of what you do today. I have given a brief intro, maybe a little bit more elaborate one.
Okay, sure, I'll do that. So in today's time, what I am essentially running are a couple of, actually three different verticals. One continues to be RedAlkemi, which is a team, which is a much smaller team now, and it's run independently by one of my, colleagues, and I kind of oversee it. So RedAlkemi is still going strong. Interestingly, it is also housed within the Aura property because I moved the office here, so now it's literally like one location where everything is run from this particular location. The second is Aura Pottery, which again has a whole bunch of verticals within it, which would essentially be things like the international artist retreats that we do and the residential retreats that we do. We have workshops, we do production for large projects. We also do our own designs, and we come up with smaller pieces which are put up on the online store, and that bit takes us into the third vertical, which is Aura Life. And Aura Life essentially does creative getaways for people. Sometimes people just want to be able to come to a place where they can brainstorm or they can just get together with their team. So Aura ends up being an ideal place for that. And the other thing that Aura Life does is the online store. So that has all of our ceramics which are designed by us. Every year, once a year, I also do this very large exhibit within Aura itself, which is for all the ceramics that I create. So that's pretty much my life now. It's not overly busy, but it's very happily busy. And of course, the other thing that I do every day is maintain this place. There's a lot of work to be done there. So that's
Interesting.
another aspect of what I do as of today.
Okay, thanks for that, Andy. So now, usually we do this a little differently. I have multiple questions for my guests, but given our theme today, you have had such a long journey in life and through your career, I've picked three bold moves. What I thought were three bold moves you have made in your life, and we'll talk about these three. And and I find it fascinating that you made these moves at this different stages of your life. Okay, so I'll start with the first one. So bold move one, starting your own company at a very young age, and you can tell us what age that was. I mean, a lot of listeners are going to be surprised that you did it at that age. Why did you decide to do that back then? And how did you decide to even start? I don't know if you knew anything about technology and when you started your first IT web services company.
Yeah. So I think the first bold move that we are talking about is when we started our company. And so, just to give you a little bit of background, my husband and I met at college. And although he was 4 years older than me, he had done three-fourth of his BSc and then quit it and come to College of Art to do advertising. And we were both advertising, we became advertising professionals eventually. Um, when we met in college, he unfortunately also did not have financial support, and that was because his family wasn't willing to support his decision of going into the art field. And as a result of which, in the first year of college, we would talk a lot about, doing something on our own, and it was always about, his one word or one name that he always had in his head was pug marks, because he was a lover of wildlife and tigers and stuff like that. So he would always say that when I exit college, I'm going to open a company, an ad agency called Pug Marks. And unfortunately, in second year itself, he got disowned. So he suddenly was back in college with no money at all. And that's when I told him that why don't we just start Pug Marks now? I mean, where's the big deal? We have college to attend, but it's not like it's so busy that we can't make some money on the side. So I was 18 years old that time. He was 21.
So
And
let's just take that in. You were 18 and your husband was 21 when you started this company.
yes,
And
that
this
is
is not now. This was not when
This
startups
is
were cool.
in
This was,
1986. Yeah,
yeah,
this is in 1986, a really long time back.
yeah.
So I think both of us got super excited about it, and we said, yeah, why not? Like, let's just do it. And interestingly, the person who gave us our first deposit of 500 rupees is still a very dear friend, and somebody who runs a very large jewelry store in Chandigarh in Sector 17. And I still distinctly remember us going to the bank with that 500 rupee. There was no 500 rupee note, by the way, that time. It was loose change. So we took that money, we opened our account, and then we just got started. So that's when Pugmarks actually started, and it was called Pugmarks Design Studio that time. And for the next 5 years, we essentially ran a visual communication agency, and even after we finished college. But the idea was, originally it started with the fact that we had to survive, and there was no money for college or hostel or food or whatever. And we were basically trying to make sure that Atul survived. And so yeah, that was when it all started. And interestingly, it went into a good direction after we finished college. So I would say that was definitely the first very bold move that I made in my life, by deciding that we want to do something like this together.
Interesting. Now, in that phase, I'm sure there must have been many challenges in that particular, phase of starting the company and then moving forward. Do you remember any one particular challenge that you thought, oh, how are we going to deal with this? And then you still kind of came out on tops later.
There were so many challenges, Sid, but all of them were very creative challenges, and they were just very, very interesting projects that we picked up. And I think the thing that really held us in good stead was our attitude. We used to just literally have a yes, it's possible attitude. And even today, the slug line for RedAlkemi is yes, it's possible. That's
Nice.
when you walk into our office, you'll see it written in a very bold way on the wall the moment you enter the office. So I think with Atul and me, the interesting thing was that anything that came our way, we would just be like, yeah, we'll do it, not a problem, we'll figure out. And we would go back and scratch our heads and say, oh, how the hell are we going to do it? But we would find a way to do it. So there were multiple, instances where this one time we were asked to do a signboard for an agency, and we just wouldn't be able to find the drill bits to be able to drill in the granite, because we thought it would be so smooth, we'll be able to install it very easily, but we weren't able to do it because the whole project was a 10,000 rupee project, but what we ended up spending on it was more than 10,000 rupees. But we were so keen on just making sure that we do it, because that was something that would go into our portfolio. And then this other time we did this, affluent treatment plant model for the Pragrati Maidan in Delhi. So we also did a lot of stuff which was beyond just visual communication. We did things like models and stuff like that. And we said, yes, it's possible, we'll do it, not a big deal, we'll create this entire model for you in like a 3D model for you, and it'll be a working model, so you'll actually be able to see how the affluent treatment happens in your plant and stuff like that. And we made the whole thing out of fiberglass, and by the end of the 10 days that we took to make it, we had fiberglass embedded in our entire body. It's just the most painful, horrible thing that can happen to somebody. We were
Oh
itching
gosh.
and scratching for the next like 1 month because we had like fiberglass literally embedded in our body. But the model came out fantastic. So if you go in the same line of thought, you can pretty much figure that we did all sorts of things, and there were all sorts of challenges. And I think they were just a lot of fun, and they seemed hard to do, but they were still just a lot of fun to do also.
Okay. I also wanted to ask you something about, of course, you started with being a design or a creative agency and a firm. Did you know anything about technology when you decided to become a IT web services firm, not just like a design firm?
No, actually, what happened was that after we ran our ad agency, we finished college. We continued to run Pugmark's design studio up until 1986, 1996, sorry. So, which means 10 years, right? We started in 86. We stopped in, ran it till 96 and beyond that also. But in 96, we happened to meet partners friends who we partnered with, and one of them was in the US and was managing a server for a large university. And we ended up basically getting into partnership with them, and that's when the whole internet thing was basically just coming about, and there wasn't much happening in India. And these guys essentially said, there is this thing called the information superhighway, and we were so excited about it, and we said, oh, we want a part of the pie, and we want to be, we want to be on that superhighway, so to speak. And so that's how we got into the IT field. And we
Hmm.
knew nothing. I can very proudly say that I'm self-taught entirely, irrespective of what technology I used then or now. And so I still remember, the first computer, which was a 286, and then the first version of CorelDRAW, which was 2.0, which is now I use 17.0 now. And initially I remember getting a book called the HTML for Dummies, and then sitting up all night. I also had two very small children that time, but I was just so obsessed with this whole thing of HTML, what is it and how does it work and stuff like that. And there was no WYSIWYG that time, so you had to literally do everything on code, and then dial up to the US. And I remember Atul and I going at 11 o'clock at night, because that's when the STD rates became 25%. So you could go to office and then dial up from there, and then upload your HTML file, then quickly check it in Netscape, which was the browser that time, and to see whether there are any errors. And then you had to guess what your mistake was, because there was no way of any artificial intelligence telling you where you fucked up. So
Yeah.
so you had to kind of guess, oh, I think I forgot to close a P, or I forgot to put a break or something like that in HTML, and then basically immediately disconnect, fix your file, upload it back again. So technology was something that we learned as we went along. It was literally like, okay, let's buy this book. How hard can it be? It was like that. There was no
Hmm.
course taken or any training taken. I think the attitude always was and has been like, how hard can it be? It
Hmm.
can't be rocket science. So if, as long as it's not rocket science, I think we could pretty much learn whatever we had to learn. So that's how the journey went, Siddharth.
Very interesting. Very interesting. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people listening to this should take inspiration from this and say, especially entrepreneurs or, somebody who's passionate about doing something. Okay, let's, I think, move to the next bold move. Okay, so now you, of course, started your design firm, you became an IT web services company. At some point, you had to exit Pugmarks. What happened then? And I'm sure it must have been a very challenging time. How did you overcome that kind of phase? And what did you tell yourself? How did you keep yourself motivated? Could you tell us that?
Thing is that the entire story is obviously a much longer story and probably is best narrated over a couple of drinks. But I'll give you the gist of it. The gist of it was that we, Atul and I, felt that the future of IT was in the services line. And unfortunately, our partners felt that it was more in the hosting business. And today, of course, we know, what is how it is, and hosting is a dime a dozen, and services are still very valued. So there was a split, unfortunately, in the ideologies of the owners of the company, so to speak. And at one point in time, because before this, all our clients were in the space where we were doing design and hosting for them both. But because we decided to part ways amicably with our partners, um, unfortunately, we weren't left with much. We were actually left with no clients, because all the clients were hosting clients, and they weren't. We were not going to be able to take them on, and but we were left with a team of about 30 people who we had to fend for suddenly. And it was literally an overnight decision where it was like, okay, Atul and Anuja hit rock bottom, because this is how the whole thing is going to be split up. And you need to figure out what to do with your agency or your company, and we'll just go our own way. So it was quite dramatic. There was a split in the office space also, and there was a wall drawn in between the two
Oh,
in the
wow.
in the office. And overnight, literally, we had like, okay, these are your people, these are our people, and you go figure and we go figure, that sort of thing. So I think that's where it was a bit of a challenge, because suddenly, as you grow into a family life and into, with children, and we were in a rented accommodation, we had, rent to pay, we had EMIs to pay on our cars, we had school fees to pay, and suddenly we literally felt that we were at rock bottom, and we didn't know what to do. And it happened to coincide with my younger daughter's fourth birthday. And I remember Atul walking into the house and just shaking his head at me very slightly, and I knew that, okay, this is now kind of over, and we'll need to just figure. So that night we went for I told him, let's go for a walk, because that's how we used to, that was a typical way of turning a negative spiral into a positive spiral. And so we went for this really long walk, and we walked till like 4 or 5 in the morning and came back, and we had a game plan. We were like, okay, we know what to do, we know how we are going to do it. And I think one of the, so I would say this entire thing was a bold move at our end. But one distinct thing that I remember happening from that time was that, I used to be also in charge of HR. So I would look after, the people in the office, and, their motivation levels and stuff like that, all the stuff that HR does typically. And I remember Atul saying that we'll have to speak to all our employees and tell them that they'll have to take a 15% cut in their salaries, because, how are we going to manage? We'll have to pay, salary will come up again next month. And I remember going and having a talk with with all the employees. And at the last minute, for some reason, instead of telling them that I'm going to take a 15, give you guys will have to take a 15% cut, I turned it around and I said, you are the guys who are staying with us, and we are the people who are going to turn this company into something absolutely magnificent. So all of you guys are going to get a 15% increment in your salary, provided we meet these targets over the next 3 months. And at the end of these 3 months, I promise to put all of you guys into a bus, and we are all going to go to Rishikesh and go river rafting. And all of that happened.
Oh,
So
nice.
that was, I think, a very interesting turning point to the entire thing, because typically in a split of this sort, employees tend to get extremely demotivated, and they start, wondering whether they should get another job or move on or whatever. And this one move really just turned the whole thing around completely. And
Wow.
so I would say that we had we somehow we had a knack of doing this. We had a knack of turning a negative spiral into a positive spiral, and it just percolated down beautifully across the entire team. And
Amazing.
yeah, so it
Amazing.
was, and then the company grew from that point. From 30 employees, it went to 250 employees, and from a 2,000 square foot office space, it went to a 9,000 square foot office space, and eventually there was, a 2,000 square foot entertainment center with a DJ room, and the lights and the works and the cafeteria, and it was so fancy and very, very cool. And I think people who worked with Red Alchemy till date have such beautiful memories of having worked with us, and they think that it was one of the really prized experiences of their life. So
Amazing. Amazing. Yeah. I mean, thanks for sharing that. I'm sure there's
yeah.
so much
Well, the
for all of
story
us
is
to.
way longer than this. So sometime when you're in Aura, I'm going to sit you down and tell you the
Oh
whole thing.
yeah, I'm going to be there. Yeah, and actually, the third thing is about aura, and I must tell the listeners, I can see a little bit of aura behind you, your house, lovely house, but
Yes, you can see.
yeah, but
Yeah.
it's a beautiful place, and Andy will speak to that. And which is actually the third thing, the third bold move I wanted to ask you.
Yeah.
You knew nothing about pottery. You knew nothing about. I'm guessing, at least
Mhm.
at some point, right? Now, of course, you do this, and you've already spoken about what you do. How did you get into pottery? And this happened at a later phase in your life, right? It wasn't at a very young age.
Yeah, yeah, it
Tell us
happened
more
later.
about that.
Yeah, just about, I would say, 8 years back. So I'm 55 today, so it was in my late 40s. But to just give you a background on the pottery, I want to tell you about Aura. And Aura was actually built in 2009 is when we started building it. And we bought this piece of land. It's a 3 acre piece of land. And when we bought it, our aspiration was only to grow vegetables here and just say that, okay, there's this place and we can do some farming or stuff like that. And one day out of the blue, I suggested to Atul that why don't we move here and why don't we build our own house here. And I would categorize this as actually the bigger bolder move than the pottery studio, because pottery studio was an offshoot of this entire bold move, which was that this city bred family is basically just upping themselves from a city life and moving to the farmland and saying let's build our own place here and just move here, and why can't it be done. And a lot of people who kind of figured that we are going to go ahead with this whole plan were actually pretty taken aback and upset with us also, because they
Had
were
you
like,
ever lived in a farm before this? You or your husband, or you were always city folks?
no, we were living in the city. We were living in
Okay,
a very, very,
always.
yeah, always, yeah.
Okay, wow.
So that's why this was the really big bold move that we made in 2009. And the other thing we decided was that since we are design professionals, and we have the background of just design, why don't we also step into spatial design and actually design the house ourselves. So again, to cut the very long story short, like I said, all my stories are really super long. Eventually we did not end up hiring an architect. We did hire a structural engineer because that is required,
Yeah.
but we eventually did not end up hiring an architect. We decided to just design our house ourselves, build it ourselves. And the way I tell the story now, in the really gist of it, is that I designed it and he built it, and that is how it happened. And again, there was no background. Like you spoke about technology. I think technology just never scared us. And I was not very happy to see how architects worked only with drawings of plans and elevations. And I was like, no, I need a 3D model. I mean, there's no way we are going to build a house without knowing what it actually looks like. So I remember downloading SketchUp and learning how to use SketchUp that time. And I know architects were not really using that software that time. And I designed the entire house on SketchUp. It took me 8 months to go through every iteration, every bit of every single nitty gritty, and everything that you see behind me in this house has actually, there's a 3D model behind it which looks exactly the same as what this house is. So that is what was, I think, the very bold move. And what ended up happening was that when I designed Aura and the home, and and you should also know that every tree, every plant that is there in Aura has been planted by us. So there was no landscape architect, there was no regular architect, there was literally nothing. So I know how to design a soak pit and how to get it made and how to do a septic tank and pretty much everything, because you have to be entirely sustainable within a space like this. There is no sewage or there's no outside help. So at the end of designing Aura, what ended up happening was that I found it extremely difficult to go back to a desk job, because it was like, I felt I was stuck in an Excel sheet when I was working in RedAlkemi. There was very little creativity in my life, and it was literally 20 years of latent creativity that oozed out of me when I was designing Aura. And I realized at that point in time that I cannot move forward in my life without it being seeped in creativity. It has to have a creative twist to it at all points in time. And that's how I ended up doing the pottery studio. So we had already built our studio because we were very sure that we'll do something or the other in the studio, and that is what was used as the field office for us when we were designing our home. Um, so eventually, that 1,000 square foot studio ended up becoming a pottery studio. And I did a 20-minute stint in Andretta Pottery in Palampur. And I remember making a fairly decent pot on their kick wheel, and just telling myself that this is something I like, and this is something I like to do and I want to do. And I like the feel of clay and stuff like that. So I came back home, and then I went and bought myself a potter's wheel, and I bought myself a bag of clay. And I thought, chalo, ye bhi seekh lete hain, it can't be so hard. So how hard can it be?
How hard can it be? Yeah,
How
I
hard
think
can it
I
be?
think that's what should have been the theme of the episode today.
Yes. Yeah. So again, that's how it started, and it was almost a weekend thing for me. So my Instagram ID initially that time used to be called the Weekend Potter, because that's what I used to only do pottery on weekends. And then yeah, so then that's how I got into pottery, Siddharth, and just started to do little bits of this, that, and the other, and entirely self-taught again. Have really, really gone through a hard time trying to figure out how to make glazes and how to do firing. And Atul and I even built two kilns of our own, because we were again the same attitude of like, how hard can it be to build a kiln?
Nice.
So we did all of those things. And it's been about 8 years now since I've been doing pottery, and the journey's been absolutely amazing. It's been very organic and extremely beautiful, very, very challenging, extremely tiring, physically taxing. And it also became my go-to place for, for just being with myself and, finding some peace, that sort of thing.
Nice.
So yeah,
Nice.
so this is encapsulated. All of it was probably all a bold move. I think bold
Amazing.
moves is something that you pretty much do every day if that's how you live your life. So
Nice. Amazing. Amazing. Yeah,
yeah,
thanks for sharing that, Andy. And I mean, let me tell the listeners, Andy is a wealth of like such gems of like wisdom and knowledge that comes out, and which is why I really look forward to the next section. Okay, so it's called shorts.
mhm.
So Andy, here what happens is I will ask you a question. There'll mostly be an agree disagree component to it. You can tell me which one you pick and 1 to 2 line explanation of why you think you agree or disagree with that statement, right?
All right.
So I'll go with the first one. There is no other way than being bold and chasing what you want or like, even if the risks are high. Agree or disagree?
I would agree with that, and I would say that it should still be measured. You can't be pig-headed about bold moves. Sometimes it comes across as pig-headed, but I think it's important to make sure that you've still thought things through. And I think a lot of visualization and a lot of thinking through is required whenever you're doing, you're making bold moves. That is the best way to do it. But a risk assessment is important. It cannot be done pig-headedly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Lovely. The next one. Challenges and bad phases in your life have always eventually turned out to be for the better. Agree or disagree?
I totally agree with that. Bad phases, challenges are actually the how would I say? the privileges of life.
Hmm.
It's a privilege to have a struggle, it's a privilege to have a challenge, it's a privilege to have a bad experience or a bad phase, because that's where the growth happens. The growth always happens then. If you have a smooth road to drive on and that's your life, it's never going to, you'll never know how to deal with a pothole or a stray cow or a stray cat or other traffic on the road. You will not learn how to maneuver life. So it's important to have these are your privileges.
Okay, very interesting. The next one. One could find their calling much later in life as well. Agree or disagree?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, look at so many people,
Hmm.
Mohan Irani comes to mind right now because I know he started his career much later in life.
Yeah.
Met him recently, couple of months back. Interesting person. But yeah, calling though, is you could wake up every morning and say, I have a new calling today. But like I said, everything else has to go hand in hand with that. You have to also be able to assess your risks and, like I said, think things through.
Yeah, yeah. I
Mm.
remember you had said something very interesting about waking up every day and going to sleep every day is almost like it's a life, right? When you
It's a
wake
life,
up.
yeah. It's a life. Like when you sleep at night, you don't know whether you're waking up tomorrow morning, right?
Yeah,
You wake up in the morning, it's a brand new day. So you could literally say, oh, I'm born again today, and let's see what I'm going to do today. And then
yeah,
go to sleep at night, you look over your shoulder and say, well lived today. So good
yeah,
life, well done. And sleep now, get some rest. And then let's see if you have life again tomorrow morning.
yeah. Next one. Who you marry or choose as a partner is the most important decision one makes in life. Agree or disagree?
I agree with that. I wouldn't say it's the most important decision, it's one of the most important decisions.
Hmm.
Because if you have decided that you want to have a certain amount of individualism, then it's very important to marry a person who's also a believer of that.
Hmm.
And if you have a different attitude where you say, oh, it doesn't matter who I marry and I'm just going to be the way I am, and my goal in life is to just look after the other person or something vague like that, then it doesn't matter, because then you're there to just for the service, right? But I would say that if you are a believer of individuality, and if you believe you owe yourself a good life, and if you believe that you're here for a purpose and you're here to do justice to your own life, then you have to find a partner who is going to also be a believer of that, and who believes that two individuals are getting married for a different purpose than what is conventionally the norm of getting married. So
Yeah,
it's more about witnessing each other's lives and supporting each other and evolving with each other, and that actually is a very joyful experience. So finding the right person to witness your life and for you to witness their life is extremely important. And evolving together with your spouse is a very pleasurable experience.
yeah,
So it is a very important thing to find the right person to spend your life with.
yep,
I agree
yep,
with that.
yep. No, thanks for sharing that. The next one, okay. Generally speaking, creative pursuits are financially a tough proposition. Agree or disagree?
I agree with that. It is very difficult to make money from creativity. And when you enter a field like advertising, for instance, it's a good balance because you've got the creativity as well as the money for the creativity. So in the College of Art, it's called applied art, which means you basically take art and you apply it commercially. It's also
Hmm.
called commercial art. So but if you go into the pure arts or the fine arts, then it does become really difficult to sustain
Hmm.
there. And I think a lot of times you'll find people, that's why we say that artists are mostly poor, but but starving artists is what we are called. But a lot of times people manage to find a very good balance and take out time for their art pursuits while also making sure that they are managing to cope with their responsibilities. And
Yeah.
I think that's a good way to go about it. Never give up that passion for art or for a creative pursuit,
Hmm.
but also be able to find time to be able to do both. And believe me, there's enough time. People
Hmm.
can if they want to. Yeah.
Okay. Very interesting. The next one, and you had spoken on this topic with me when we met. So I wanted the listeners also to hear your point of view on this. Okay. So the purpose of life is to just live a good and full life and nothing more. Agree or disagree?
Uh, I agree, but everybody's version of what is a full life could be different. So
Yeah.
somebody might say that my aspiration is to marry a rich man and then just lord over the house and be a socialite, and that is the purpose of life.
Hmm.
And they would be, so it depends on a personal aspiration. The
Hmm.
purpose of life, in my view, is to do justice to your own life. It is a gift. You are here for a purpose, and it's not a larger than life purpose necessarily. It's, you could at the end of your life just be patting yourself on the back and saying, "Well played." And I feel happy with everything that I've done in my life, and that's good for me. That could be your purpose in life. So it doesn't have to be larger than life or philanthropic or anything of that sort, but just the sense of feeling that you have done justice to a life that you got. Life ki seat nahi kharab karni chahiye is what I remember telling
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
you.
Exactly. And which is why,
लाइफ मिली है तो उसकी सीट मत खराब करो. Do justice
true,
to it.
true, true, true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. One more. What do you say to yourself when you're going through a tough or challenging time? And this could even be advice to others, right? To maybe to your daughters or somebody else you meet. What is the one advice you give to people who are going through a tough time? It could be professionally, personally.
uh, I think I always tell people to hang in there and to believe that it'll pass.
Hmm.
It'll pass, and it always passes. You would have seen that in your own life also. You
You had
would.
the story to narrate about the
Yeah,
ring, right?
the ring, yeah.
Maybe if you could.
So King Solomon sending his minister to look for an object which makes a sad man happy and a happy man sad, and eventually the man finds a hermit who gives him a ring which has an inscription inside it which says, "This too shall pass." And whether you give that phrase to a happy man, they'll realize that okay, happiness also will pass. And if you give that to an unhappy person, they will realize that this too shall pass. So it does pass at the end of the day. Like in my 55 years of experience, I have realized that ups and downs are a part and parcel of life, and they are what make your memories, and they are what strengthen you, and they are what you look back on and you say, gosh, I remember being so miserable that time, and
Hmm.
but it all worked out well, and it all happened for the best. And so when you're going through a rough time, you may feel that why is this happening with me. And I think that's the other thing that one should avoid doing, which is asking that question, why is it happening with me.
Hmm.
It doesn't matter what's happening with you. It's a privilege in some way or the other. You'll discover it at some point or the other.
Yeah.
Something is good is going to come out of it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's pretty much my view on on
Okay.
this thing. And
Excellent.
that's the
Lovely.
advice I try to give to people, that don't lose heart. Put your head down, keep working. That's it. I tell that to people all the time. Just put your head down and keep working. Just
Okay.
keep at it, and something good will come out of it. Hard work will never ever ever go waste.
Okay. Lovely. Really nice advice. Okay, Andy, a book or maybe even more than one that inspired you.
A book that inspires me. Uh, I don't know if you've read any Ayn Rand books, but I
Yeah.
would say the two,
Fountainhead, Atlas
the
Shrugged.
Fountainhead and the Atlas Shrugged. I think I would go back. I recommend people reading that book once a decade.
Hmm.
It gives you a different message every time. I first remember reading it when I was 18 or 19 years old, and I think that might have been a huge reason for doing what I did. The first bold move, I would say.
Hmm. Hmm.
Just having that immense passion for you know having an eye for detail, doing things the way you think is correct, and not letting your living an ethical life, not letting life jade you,
Hmm.
because it's so easy to succumb uh, to things which you will not sleep well with at night. it's so
Hmm.
easy to succumb to it. At night you will lie down in bed and say, oh shit, मुझे ये नहीं करना चाहिए था, I shouldn't have done that, or whatever. So I just think that, it's not, I'm not trying to give a moral lecture here or anything, but I'm just saying that to just be super comfortable with yourself and to say that this is what I stand for. And,
Hmm.
and I think those books are really, really eye opening when it comes to that. And if at times you're feeling, and I just read them again last year. So, like I said, I recommend reading them once. And they are very hard books to read physically. I did hear them on Audible last year instead of reading them physically. And I think that's a very good way of also absorbing the message, to, do it on Audible instead
Hmm.
of physically reading that book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. And okay, similar lines. Is there a movie or series or bunch of them that inspire you that you revisit from time to time also, maybe?
I'm not really such a big movie buff. I am more, how do I put it? Like a personal growth, self-help type of consumer of content. So um, I end up listening to books which are, which have the messages that I'm interested in, but not so much the movies. I enjoy watching comedies and lighter movies, because for me movies are more unwinding activity than something that is necessarily inspirational. But I wouldn't say I haven't watched movies which have inspired me. I just can't think of one right now. But yeah, there are messages to be learned from so many different type of movies. So I don't really have a clear cut answer for you there.
No worries, not a problem, Andy. So that's actually the end of the things I wanted to ask you, Andy, today. And you have led such an amazing life. You've had so much to share and trust. I mean, I can tell you the listeners here that this is not even like the tip of the iceberg. If you get an opportunity, please visit Andy at Aura. It's near Chandigarh. Go and stay there. And I'm sure Andy won't mind sharing some stories if you go and stay there at the property. I plan
Not
to
at
do
all.
that sometime
I
soon.
am I am branded as the chief storyteller at Aura. So
Oh, very appropriate title and very deep stories. It's not. It comes with a lot of experience that and life that you have seen. So
thank
yeah,
you.
thanks, Andy. Thanks so much for sharing coming on the show and sharing all the stuff that you did. I'm sure people listening to this are going to take away something when they listen to this.
Thank you so much, Sid. It was a pleasure, as always, chatting with you. And all the best for your show. I'm sure it's going to go great. Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. Thanks so much. So that was today's episode. Before I wrap up, I want to take a moment to express my gratitude to you for tuning in. If you've enjoyed today's conversation, I'd like to ask for your help in spreading the word about the podcast. If you think there's someone in your life who might enjoy listening to the Magnificent Misfits podcast, please consider sharing it with them. Also, if you're active on social media, we'd love for you to give us a shout out and tag us at MN Podcast Show. That's MN Podcast Show. Thank you and see you soon.